Welcome to a special Trench Chats, and I'm really pleased to welcome back Peter Doyle to discuss a new book that he's been working on and a really special souvenir of the Great War that's an iconic item, really, in any collection. So, welcome back, Peter.
Thanks very much.
So, you've been working on this book on the 1914 Christmas tin. I remember my aunt gave me one when I was a teenager, and it is just such this iconic object that connects you to the Great War. And I'm amazed no one's written a book before, and now you have.
And absolutely, Paul. I mean, the critical thing here is that one would expect a book to exist on this topic. There was an article written on it back in the 80s, and, pretty good it was too. But one of the things that's always fascinated me is that this iconic object exists in such quantities. And I was thinking, well, if this is a tin or a box that was given out to people at Christmas 1914, why is it that there are so many of them? And I think I really was interested in it because, like you come across these, you are given them, or you find them in people's collections, or they have something that they don't really understand their connection. And so I was really keen to get to grips with it. And it came down to two tins that I'd obtained. One, which was Gunner Shellis of the Royal Field Artillery in the North Midland Division, who went through the war, and including going over the Canal du Nord and the whole deal right the way through the war. He had his medals within there, he had his Silver War badge, he had his diaries associated with it. And it's very much part of the fabric of the soldier's life. So that was my first introduction to it. And then the second one was a box in its cardboard box with all bits and pieces in all the originals untouched. And these two tins really fascinated me. How does this go through the war? Why does it matter to those men? And also, what is the story behind it? Now, one thing, Paul, you'll know about this as well as anybody else. If you look on the internet, you will find everybody has an opinion on the Princess Mary's gift box. And I think rightly so, because it's so interesting. And what's also really interesting is that every one of those, generally speaking, is just not quite right. And so I thought, not to say that I could do particularly a magnificent job on this, but I thought, well, it's about time somebody told the real story and set the scene straight. And that's what I intended to do. And it became a real lockdown project for me.
Yeah, and we all need these lockdown projects, don't we? Yeah. So how did the story of this come about? This gift that was sent to all these soldiers and servicemen at the front.
Well, I think what's really interesting. So what I've done is I've gone through all the archive materials, been really helpful. Everybody's been really helpful in terms of supporting me with looking back through the original archives and getting to the root of the story here. And I think one of the things that we really need to think about is the context of 1914, and particularly the context of it in terms of the royal family and the meaning of their engagement with the war. I think it's easy now to see the royal family in slightly different ways, perhaps, but they were revered, absolutely revered. And King George V, very serious man, of course, but a man totally dedicated to service. And I mean, it's a really fantastic tale showing just how it connects with the ordinary citizen, how as riding down in, I think, Sandringham or somewhere, riding down the road with his two eldest sons, both of whom were destined to be kings. And they're riding past, they go past some guys sweeping up some leaves or whatever, and the two sons don't say anything. The guys are tipping their sort of, their hats or whatever, and the two sons say nothing. He sends them back. King George V says, you show these men respect. They go back, they apologize, they bid them good morning, and they move along. Now, that's just an indication of, I think, the relationship that the royal family had then with their subjects. And I think you look at King George V and you can see the lines on his face and the significance of the war to him as you go through that. Queen Mary, if you look into Queen Mary's life, it's an absolutely phenomenal story. She's what a incredible character, what an amazing person. And she's, as soon as the war is on their doorstep, King George V is anxious about it. Queen Mary's thinking, right, what are we going to do? We're going to fix some things here. We're going to get things moving. So she, within the opening days, she is with her eldest son, Prince of Wales, setting up the National Relief Fund. which is to give money to people in distress. And that brings in millions of pounds as people give money to support families, servicemen and women, and families in distress. And that's incredible. We also see Queen Mary getting involved in supplying knitted goods to the soldiers at the front. She's a skilled needlewoman, and so what she's doing here is working to bring back trades and getting people involved. And we tend to think of that maybe it's just middle class or society ladies are doing that. No, it's everybody. And she's getting these needlework guilds together, and they're doing lots of knitting. You'll be fully aware of all of the stories of people receiving, those balaclavas and funny stories about socks not fitting and all of that. But this is all really from that. So in the mix then is a 17-year-old Princess Mary. She's somebody who hasn't had a biography written about her since 1922. There was one in 1924, but it was written, ironically, by a fraudster who I think his name was Netley Graham or something like this. And this guy wrote a book. It was a complete fraud, but it was actually a well-written book. And he was a real chancer. So the only biography of Princess Mary from that time, from the 1920s, was actually published this year by Elizabeth Basford, and it's a really good, cracking read. Tells about the story of Princess Mary, and she, as a 17-year-old, is totally dedicated to service. She's not somebody you will necessarily know much about if you just the average person in the street, but she's very influential. Elizabeth has put her as the first modern princess. And I think in many ways, she dedicated herself, she engaged. Everything she did with a passion in a very serious way, but engaged with it. So what I did was I dug out, with the help of Harwood House, who's where Princess Mary lived out her life. We went back and looked at the diaries. She's not effusive. She's not overly dramatic. But in early October 1914, she has a meeting with the Prince of Wales, Queen Mary, and the treasurer of the Prince of Wales's National Relief Fund about sending gifts to the soldiers and sailors, or should I really say sailors and soldiers? That's the way it's always portrayed, both at the high seas and at the front. And from that, just 2 weeks later, you see in the Ritz Hotel the development of a huge committee led by the Duke of Devonshire, with many, many senior individuals, some of them senior women, and they have a major role to play, as I'll possibly get on to talk later if I don't talk for hours. And I think what you see there is the germination of an idea that came about just a couple of weeks before about, can we send some gifts to the soldiers and sailors? And immediately we start to see the processing. Bear in mind, this is October the 14th, and they've got until December the 25th. I don't think people even do their Christmas shopping in that period. That's quite a challenge these days. They had to design something which becomes an icon and deliver it. And they determine at that point that they would send a gift comprising a number of things. It would be the brass box, which of course we all are aware of. There are many different variations of this. And in the brass box, this is one with a slightly different patina, very dark. In the brass box, there would be, of course, cigarettes and tobacco. In addition to that, there would be a pipe. This is a pipe which has been given to a Royal Field Artilleryman. There would also be a tinder lighter. This is a strange thing when you think about it, but what is this? Well, the intention is that you would have a series of flints, as they're called. You would strike them on the steel here, and it would, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a sort of bit of the
wick.
The wick, yeah, exactly, yeah. Thank you. And that would smoulder, but wouldn't have a flame, and therefore much safer in the trenches to support those men, and also, of course, on ships. In addition to that, there would be a Christmas card, which is this thing in its envelope, designed by Delarue, and a little card showing the illustration of Princess Mary, which I'm sure you, being an avid Henry Williamson fan, will have come across this story about when, during the Christmas truce, a German soldier had one of these and said, schön, beautiful princess. And in many ways, I think she's a beautiful soul. And you do have to think that she hasn't crowed about this, she hasn't showed off about this, but her influence was strong in developing this. The actual gift, of course, designed, delivered by a committee of strong individuals, but her role in this was pivotal. So that's it in a nutshell. There's lots more detail on this one, Paul, we can go through.
Yeah, so she gives her name to it, and it becomes this iconic thing. And she is a young princess. Do you think that the troops at the front were entirely aware of who she was?
I think they were. I think, and that's an interesting question. Obviously, they were fully aware of the Prince of Wales, and also of Prince Albert, who became George VI, who was serving at sea. So you had the Prince of Wales, who was constantly yearning to be at the front. And if you read anything about him, he was never happier unless he was, in the trenches, in the mud. And of course, Kitchener said at the time, "Look, we can't afford. Imagine if he killed, and probably more significantly, imagine if he were captured." So I think there are, he was always yearning to get there. He was always in uniform. Wherever he went, he was well received. Prince Albert, slightly less effusive perhaps, but he was serving at sea. I mean, the guy's serving at sea. Both of these men served at the front in some way or other, or in the front line anyway. And I think they were well known. Princess Mary, of course, perhaps less well known, but she was in society pages. She was all over the newspapers. I've looked at newspapers now from across the empire and also the United States, and Princess Mary is all over that. So I think they loved the idea of a young princess. She was very able to keep up with her brothers. She didn't let them domineer her in any way. She was sporty, she was well educated, and she was also capable of, arguing well with her brothers. So I think she held her own. So I do think that she was in the public eye. So when the soldiers and sailors receive them, none of them call it Queen Mary's tin. We get that a lot today as people confuse, and it's hardly surprising. Queen Mary, Princess Mary, and there are other Marys. But no, I think they really did know it was from the princess. And of course, the critical thing about it is the princess's face is right there. So this is based on a photograph by Ernest Brooks, very famous war photographer and society photographer. And there's connections with this, was also Ernest Brooks' photograph. So I think she was somebody that they admired, and they understood, and they knew it was from her herself, which is a nice thing. We make that confusion these days.
I guess that the idea of a princess sending this gift to the troops probably gives it more power than if it had been one of the princes, because it might have sounded a bit too much like it was some sort of patronage on their part and a bit of condescension. Whereas, given the mores of the day, a woman sending a gift like this, it would have had a different dimension to it, I guess.
I think that's right, Paul. I think one of the things that we underestimate this, really the relationship that the men in the sailors and the soldiers have. I've read as much as I can about this, as much as is written. And at no point do the men who receive these, and the women, we'll perhaps come on to that in a moment, but the men who receive these, none of them are speaking in disparaging terms. Everybody values it. It's an incredible thing. And there's a really important thing to mention here is not only that, there was also a really direct connection with the king and queen, because they got a separate gift, these two cards. These two cards were sent in an envelope with the royal arms on them. And you can see that there you've got the king and queen. Depending on whether you're in the army or the navy, you received a different card. These were sent completely separately. And there are many reports of sailors and soldiers receiving them. And they're delighted, and absolutely delighted. They think it's real recognition of their sovereign to them, directly, personal to them. And it's exactly the same with Princess Mary. So whereas with the King and Queen's Christmas card, they're thinking, well, I'm getting a Christmas card from the sovereign. That's something I need to keep. With Princess Mary's tin, there's perhaps a little bit more of an emotional attachment, a young princess, a 17-year-old who's gone to this trouble, who's sent us this amazing gift. I mean, honestly, it consists of everything is highly designed in here. Everything that's on that tin has a iconography that has a meaning, and it's the same with all the items that are associated with it. So I think they really valued it, and nobody disparaged it. Everybody thought, as far as I've read, everybody thought it was an amazing thing. And of course, it also saved men's lives. There are many, many accounts of men having their lives saved by these tins. It's incredible.
So, given that there was about an 8-week window between the formation of the idea and the arrival of a fixed point, which is Christmas Day, in modern times, recently we've seen how quickly things can be rolled out, and I guess something similar happened with this, because that's quite a small time frame.
It is, and I think one of the things that there are many sort of established views on how the tin came about and who produced them. And they're generally drawn apart from a report that was published in 1919, 1920, which is the final report, which has lots of stats in it and very, very straightforward information about it. And it's a really valuable document. And they say that the tin was designed by Messrs. Adshed and Ramsey. Adshed and Ramsey were obviously architects at the time. That's great, but how did it come to pass that Adshed and Ramsey architects received this commission? And also, fascinating thing is that when it went to the press, October 15th, October 16th, it went across the world at that time as well. When it came to the press, they'd already decided what was going to be in those tins and what the tin would look like. So between the 6th of October and the 14th of October, they got busy. And I think in my book, I've made a direct connection here about why it was that Adshed, Professor Adshed, was the man in this situation. This all comes down to William Hesketh Lever, Lever of Port Sunlight and Sunlight Soap fame. Lever was a very influential character, as you can imagine, sat on the National Relief Fund and also on this particular fund. He had a direct connection with Professor Adshed, because without him, without Lever, Adshed wouldn't have been a professor. Adshed was placed in Liverpool University as the first professor of civic design. And it doesn't take much to draw the conclusions that they're saying, right, how are we going to design this? I know. Adshed, he's the man. He's noted for his Edwardian aesthetic. And, we have that writ large across this tin.
Absolutely,
so what you can see on that tin are all of these things here are part of that careful design drafting of Adshed. So that's what they went into. And then, of course, the committee had to source everything else that was going to go into that. And that's where a lot of the mythologies of the tin and what was in them and what was included with it have been born, because there were one or two notable things that they couldn't deliver on, and particularly this object here, the tin dilator, which is very rare.
So the contents, I mean, I've seen and indeed heard the supposed variants and different contents and so on, yep. Smokers versions, non-smokers versions, and so on.
Yep.
So what's the lowdown on that? What is the official word on what was in these tins?
So it's an absolutely fascinating topic area. So there are actually two sets of tins, and there are 6 basic variants to the tin itself. This is very, very detailed. But one of the interesting things is in the first meetings in the Ritz Hotel, they determined the members of the committee, military and army and navy members, made an estimation of how many men were serving overseas at that time. Now, bear in mind that the first Christmas box was to go to all sailors afloat, all soldiers at the front. That was the conception. So this meant, of course, that they had to do an estimate, and they reckoned that the soldiers at the front, which included the Indian Army in France and Flanders and the British Army, plus the Navy, would add up to around 500,000. So about 350,000 soldiers, including the Indians, and about 150,000 naval types. Bear in mind, everything was always sailors and soldiers, because the king is a sailor king. There's no doubt it was always going to be sailors first, and you can understand why. So that's the first tranche, and that first tranche had 5 items. So again, as discussed, we have the box and the cigarettes and tobacco. One of the interesting things about those is just how carefully designed they are. You know, they have Mary's distinctive monogram on them, and of course, the writing about the gift fund. So those are all sourced from noted cigarette producers. There were huge numbers of cigarette producers. I don't know how many, there were millions. I've got it in my book. I mean, how many millions of cigarettes were produced, but they were. And they were all repackaged in that way. The Christmas card, which is part of that, this fits nicely within the box. There's a little recess. On top of this, there's a little recessed area you can see there. That's where, in effect, the Christmas card sits on top of the box there and in the lid. And the Christmas card is really important because it's designed by Thomas de la Rue. De la Rue is a company still around today, major banknote producer. At the time, they went through a little bit of a rocky path, but they also designed playing cards and everything. And they did it kind of pro bono. They did it for nothing originally, and then they did it for cost. And it has this sort of message, and if you can see that, with best wishes for a happy Christmas and a victorious New Year from Princess Mary and friends at home. So this is quite a strongly designed, again with the logo of Princess Mary, strongly designed thing. That's in there. Now, this little card is fascinating because this is actually a cigarette card. And therefore, everybody says, why is it that all the cigarette packets are open? That's very, very simple because within those cigarettes, you can see them here. So within the cigarette packet, you had the cigarette card, which fitted inside the packet itself. Each cigarette has a monogram of Princess Mary on it. And at each one of them, I've never seen a sealed one. They're always open. That's because of the cigarette card. And I know that from the archives, and I know that from surviving examples. So that definitely was inside those cigarettes, which is fascinating.
And that was part of the sort of culture at the time, wasn't it? Cigarette cards within cigarette packets. So they would have automatically assumed, I guess, that something would have been in there.
And you can imagine the stories of, well, absolutely, Paul. You can imagine the wildfire stories going through, what's there exciting? Let's open it up. And again, even if by accident they come across it, they'd be really excited by that. And I think it's fascinating. I did look into the whole deal about cigarette cards. Huge interest in that, of course. And at the time, of course, it's estimated in all the literature that 95% of men smoked, 95%. So therefore, cigarette cards were aimed at men. And they were either sort of society beauties, actresses, military things, sports, that kind of thing. And so this image of a beautiful princess fits exactly with that notion. And then there's the pipe. Now, this is one of many different types. I only know that this is definitely a Princess Mary pipe because the soldier has basically created this little silver band with his name on it. There's lots of mythology about having ones with monograms on them and, indicative of them being from the gift. There's no evidence of that. What they did was they bought, if you think about it, 500,000 pipes had to be sourced. And so they bought them from the pipe manufacturers, and there are so many different variations. The ones that I have seen that are definitely have provenance are ones which are, none of them are alike. They are all small, they are all briar pipes in general terms. Now, the thing that's possibly not known, and is certainly in my book, is that they had considered producing calabash pipes. Now, it took me some time to work out what a calabash pipe is, but if you think of Sherlock Holmes with his big pipe with the white rim, this is from the Calabash Gourd of South Africa, and they examined whether or not they could supply 500,000 calabash pipes. They couldn't do it for the money, so that was shelved. So there are many versions of this, and you finding the provenance is a challenge. But the most phenomenal thing, as already hinted, is this, which is, I don't know if you can see that, it has marking. Oops.
Oh yeah,
it's marked.
Yeah,
with Princess Mary's thing, but on the back, and this is very, very small. It actually has a magical name just there. which says Asprey, London.
Wow.
Now, Asprey's, it's certainly not a shop that I would walk into without some element of trepidation. It is very, very high end indeed. And Asprey's had a royal warrant, of course, to supply silver goods and leather goods and luggage and what have you to the royal family. So they were approached to supply this tinder lighter, which, again, as described, is to make sure that it smolders. They could light numerous cigarettes and pipes and what have you without a flame. Very important. 500,000 of those. So you can imagine, therefore, a small, very well appointed organization would have real difficulty supplying 500,000 of these. And the real critical thing is, you see here, there's a little channel. That's where the so-called flints would have been placed. Now, the flints are actually not flints, they're cerium. They're a particular alloy of cerium. And cerium has a sparking capability. And this was designed and invented or discovered, I guess, by Austrian chemists. There's a whole, I can't remember the name of the village in Austria, but there's a whole museum dedicated to the work of this individual. And the company continues today as working with this, using these cerium things. But you can imagine at the time that if your major supplier was cerium flints, you'd have a real problem. And so Asprey suddenly realized they weren't going to be able to get involved in supplying anymore. And this is where the problem lies. You look back in the archives, you'll notice that Asprey's aren't mentioned in the final report. That's because Asprey's and the Princess Mary Gift Fund had some legal tussling, and they realized that no written contract existed, and therefore Asprey's kind of threatened to sue them if they mentioned Asprey's failure to deliver. So that meant they had to go to commercial ones like this one. So this is a commercial one, typical of the time. It has a wheel here for sparking. You can see the spark there. First time I've ever done that, but you can see it worked, which has a kind of flint inside and the sparking wheel inside. And there you have, again, the smouldering rope. And these were produced by a great many companies and supplied in different gifts. There were many, many gifts that people bought from newspapers and what have you, and this is very typical. So what the group did was to try and source some more of these. But you're still not going to get up to 500,000 gifts. So you had to replace this. They'd already promised you'd be giving like 5 items away. So they had to do something else. And this is one of those. This also has a monogram on it. I don't know if you can see that. There's the M monogram. Yep. It's a 303 round. It's been fired, as you can see. And when you take it out, of course, it is a pencil in this way. There we go. Sorry, should have run that in so that you could see it. So it comes out of there as a pencil and is a bullet pencil. Now, the bullet pencil is something that was designed specifically to give to the Navy. And this is where we have to bring in a heroine of this whole story, another heroine, and that is Lady Jellicoe. Lady Jellicoe, if you look on Pathé newsreels, you'll see Lady Jellicoe. She is an absolute champion of the Navy. She is a real, both her and El Jellicoe, of course, very, very strongly engaged with the Navy. And what Lady Jellicoe did was to always stand up for the Navy in this committee. She was never absent. She was always there. And she suggested that because of the problems with the tinder lighter, that the Navy should receive a bullet pencil like this. Now you may think, well, great, but who ever thought about a bullet pencil? Well, this is one from the Battle of Omdurman, 1898. It's got Omdurman written on it. And it's got Remember Gordon on the back. Yeah. And this is, I don't know if I can get it to work because it's a bit tricky, but this is quite a fancy propelling pencil.
Yeah, oh, wow. The nib's coming out the tip of the board.
Exactly. So it's a propelling pencil. It propels a bit further than that. These were picked up from the Battle of Omdurman, the battleground. And this was produced as a charity deal by Mackins to pay for what is currently the University of Khartoum. So this this is, I think there's an inspiration for many of these bullet pencils. So although this is less complex than this, you can see direct correlation. And you can also look in 1950s, 30s to 50s America, because you will see that the bullet pencil becomes part of its advertising approach. And you go Evans, Schneider, and Buell of Chicago, Illinois. Wow. So I think the bullet pencil is more prevalent than we might have thought about at the time. And so it was down to Lady Jellicoe, and that was one of the replacements. Now, where the mythology comes is what else is part of that? And that's all explored in my book, The Likelihood of Replacements. There are a whole host of things which are listed out, very, very difficult to provenance. I have a provenanced one, which is a penknife, which again is in detail, from the 2nd Royal Irish Rifles, who you'll remember from the Burgoyne Diaries, Paul, which is an amazing book. One of my favorites. Yes, his fragrant disregard for his men is quite fascinating. But it's, I think, again, there are all kinds and manners of replacement things, some of which are bullet pencils, some of which are knives, scissors, tobacco pouches, and what have you. And it's these things which are the most difficult to source and most discussed. Right, but so you've got 95% of men who are smokers. So into the archives and the minutes of the meetings comes non-smokers. Now, as an ardent non-smoker myself, I can appreciate that. But I'm thinking this is 5% of a lot of men, a very, very small minority, and yet they had a really, really big vocal engagement. There must have been a very, very strong lobbying of the Princess Mary Gift Fund. And it meant that they got a huge amount of attention very early on. And they ended up with instead of the smoking materials, they ended up with a pouch like this. And this one's an empty one, but it contained within it, beautifully designed by Delarue, it contained a notepad, envelopes, a different type of pencil. They received this, and they received sweets, and which are also a matter of discussion. Their sweets were acid drops, very rare. And they also received the box and the Christmas card and so on and so forth. So they replaced those things. So all of that is a very nice addition, and some men, chose to have that. Now, the question is how many of these were produced? And we're talking about small, very, very small percentage of the number of men. I can't remember the exact number, but it's just, like a couple of thousand, if that. So it's not as if it's like every 5th one or every 4th one. It is a very, very small number. And you have to think to yourself, they went to this extent when surely those men could have just traded those cigarettes for whatever they wanted, but they went to that extent. But what's really surprising, Paul, is that 2 weeks after all of that is discussed, they start to think, shouldn't we give something to nurses? Now, I'm a bit naive here, but I'm thinking, why weren't nurses thought about in the first breath of this? Because if you read, as you'll have read, the Nursing Sisters book, I think it's by Luard. It's incredible stuff about working on the hospital trains and the sights they saw, going into Ypres Station, picking up the wounded, the lice, the mud, the absolute degradation of these poor men, and their incredible bravery and stoicism in this. And you're telling me they weren't thought about from the beginning? I'm shocked. So I think this is probably either inadvertently misogynistic or absolutely so. And it pains me a little bit. But they soon picked up on this. And what they did was they produced a chocolate bar, which was produced by Debris, which is a chocolate manufacturer, high-end in Oxford Street, and Pascal from Huddersfield. And they produced these chocolate packs. But the thing that I can't understand is, why didn't they just give the nurses this with all the stuff? I can't understand that. Maybe they thought that was too masculine. I don't know about the mores of the time, but there you have it. And they're very, very rare. I've had the benefit of seeing one, handling one, photographing it for my book. Only 1,500 of these things exist. how many actually exist today, very small numbers. And then we get onto the Indian troops, and I think this is the most fascinating story of all. I've got to be honest. And stop me if I'm talking too much here, Paul. But
not at all. No.
The story of the Indian soldiers is one which is phenomenal. You of all people will know this hugely. You'll in all your work in the salient, having seen them, what they went through, how the Indian troops, the Indian armies that came, Indian Expeditionary Force, what they had to put up with, and yet how they did that with such stoicism. It's mind-boggling, and it's really fascinating. And what's really, although the nurse's story is less heartwarming, because you think, well, yes, it was something that they were an afterthought, and as an addendum to that, you can see that Lady Jellicoe, very late in the game, is saying, hold on a minute, what about the nurses, the Navy nurses on the hospital ships? And they said, no, we can't do that. She pushed, and they got the gift as well. So it shows you the kind of challenges this and how much of a heroine Lady Jellicoe was. There's another heroine in this as well, which I need to draw attention to. But needless to say, I think the positive here is that the Indian soldiers were always considered as a very, very significant contribution to the army. You only read everywhere that just how revered in many ways the Indian army was, how it was respected, how it was seen as almost an incredible force, a spectacle, of course, but men who were committed to an environment they'd never seen before. They'd never gone further than Malta. They'd not seen this kind of environment before. And then how much they spent researching and considering just what the individual groups of Indian soldiers would require. And it was the Indian army, as you well know, was divided up on both racial grounds and also regional grounds and religious grounds. So you had a complex mix of this. So your average Sikh, for example, as you know, very proud soldiers today as they were then. And the Sikhs, because of the Sikh religion, smoking is an absolute anathema. It's just, it's not something that a Sikh would engage in. It's against their religious practices. And therefore, the idea of giving a box full of cigarettes and tobacco to Sikh soldiers would be an absolute massive insult. This is something that they were fully aware of from the beginning. Gurkhas, on the other hand, again, very strongly engaged soldiers and soldiers who would be used to doing a lot of smoking. So you've got this complex mix of what they would receive, different groups of Indian soldiers receiving completely different things. And those are very elusive to find that. What I did was the Sikh soldiers received a box of spices. I've not seen one in the flesh, but I have seen images of that box, a very small tin box. One assumes of mixed spices. They also received, of course, the Christmas card. They received the Princess Mary box, and that was filled with broken candy. And the Indian troops themselves had their own comforts fund, very strongly supported by Bobs, or Roberts, of course, and others. And Hewitt, who was the chairman or secretary of that, was also advising to the Princess Mary gift fund on what should be received. In fact, they sought out opinion widely. They even went to Sir Ratan Tata, who was a philanthropist, heir to the Tata fortune. We know Tata today, Tata Steel, Tata Cars, foodstuffs, you name it. Owners of Jaguar, of course. I know that's my brother-in-law works for them. But Sir Ratan Tata, buried in London, very strongly engaged in supporting Indian people in London and poverty-stricken people in India, was also a man contacted for his advice. So strongly engaged, and I think that's a fascinating story. And in my book, we have evidence of soldiers that were exhumed from the battlefields just 5 years ago who have on their person the Princess Mary gift tin and have associated with them Indian coins, Indian related equipment, and there is no doubt in my mind that those are Indian soldiers. And
Wow.
they also have pipes. So the location, the presence of the tin, the Indian provenance, these have got to be Gurkhas, as far as I'm concerned. And I think what was really struck me about that is that these men were killed in 1915, secondly, and we are looking at men who carried in their breast pocket this very strong image of the princess on that tin. Now that's quite a moving thing for me, as far as I'm concerned. We've got there's a bigger story beyond that, and it's this one. Okay, you're looking at another tin, fine, but in this case, you're looking at a tin with a New Year's card. It's got 1915 on it, and balancing everything here. Inside, this didn't come in a envelope, and it's got once again with best wishes for a victorious New Year. Now you have to think to yourself, well, hold on a minute, this is a Christmas gift, isn't it? And why are they giving it in 1915? And to whom did they give it? What's happening is that in as the demand for donations, and this went across the nation. In not only were people giving money, their coppers, small items of coinage, or big donations to the National Relief Fund, they were also really engaged with Princess Mary Fund. And you see schools, of course, making a direct connection with a 17-year-old, but also Christmas gifts. You see they wanted to do this tastefully. They didn't really want cards in windows and people knocking on doors, but it really gathered momentum. So by November the 25th, 1914, they realized they've got sufficient money to make sure that the nurses, non-smokers, and what have you have these extra gifts, but that they could take it away from every sailor afloat, every soldier at the front, to every man in uniform, and it was specifically men, they dealt with the nurses in the earlier tranche, every man in uniform at Christmas 1914. And suddenly you go away from men who are in the trenches or on ships, which would include some Canadians, for example, just coming over the Princess Pat's over there, and some men serving with the medical corps. And you're now talking about men in training in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. You're looking at men who are destined to go to Gallipoli, men who would come with the Canadians to Salisbury Plain. And you're looking at Kitchener's Army and the Territorials who were in service at home and ready, Kitchener's Army in particular, who were citizens before that and are now, ready and being trained before they go to Lewis in 1915 or the Somme in 1916. And the Territorials who, had service overseas before they are summoned up into, divisions. Obviously, there were Territorials in Flanders in 1914, but this is the wider group of Territorials. So you go from 500,000 to 2.5 million men. And you think, can you supply 2.5 million lots of, tinder lighters and all that? No. What you can do is take and expand the idea of, as presented by Lady Jellicoe, of the bullet pencil. And that's where this little cardboard insert and a bullet pencil is placed inside. So this is indicative of the gift that was given to every man, specifically men, in uniform at Christmas Day. And it was therefore given to soldiers who were already on their way to Gallipoli, who maybe had lost their lives in Gallipoli and had returned. And obviously this was then given to their families in Australia. Same with New Zealand. Same with those men who were Territorials or Kitchener's Army who would serve in Flanders or on the Somme or later on in the war. And the distribution of this became an absolute nightmare because whereas the other ones are relatively straightforward, given to every man that they knew at the front or at sea, and there were complexities. Men had been captured, men had been killed, and those were listed out and provision would be made from. Now you're talking about 2.5 million men from across the empire. And it's a story that descends into absolute agony of detail, because that's great. But where are you going to get £2.5 million worth, I mean, in terms of financial, 2.5 million men's worth, beg your pardon, of brass when you're making munitions out of brass? You are suddenly in contrast with the fact that you're making shells, but you're making these beautiful but kind of meaningless slightly now tins, 1915, 1916. Men are not receiving these until 1916, 1917. They're not receiving them perhaps until they come back. And I mentioned the one that I received in a cardboard box. This was one that was claimed by a Royal Fusilier. He'd been captured, he'd been considered dead, who came back from the dead in 1919, 1918, 1919, and said, right, where's my tin? And they went, what? So rifleman Angrave of the King's Royal Rifles. He didn't look at this thing. He just I want this. This is mine. So he received it. And I think the story of this is that there were a great many newspaper reports in 1919 saying, anybody who needs this, please contact us. Please get in touch. And, you can see that also across the empire. Many, many positive reports about families in Australia who received this in honor of their soldier boys who were killed. It's a heart-rending tale, but it is a humongous task that they took on that finally they resolved only in 1919, 1920, when they all sewed it all up. So it's an incredible story. And when we think about this brass, there was one thing that always troubled me. The original article, or one of the original articles, mentioned the Lusitania in brief. The Lusitania was sank, as you know, in 1915. Down to the bottom of the Irish Sea went a lot of brass, and that brass was on its way for munitions, but also on its way for Princess Mary's gift tins. Uh-huh. And there's a statement in the archive that says that the brass that we ordered now lies at the bottom of the sea, bottom of the Irish Sea, which is a kind of despairing way of putting it. We spent all this time trying to receive it, and now it's at the bottom of the sea. There are many, many other stories about this, the challenges they had, the rising costs, the difficulty of sourcing things, the legal battles. The thing goes on and on and on. And, I've tried to capture every last detail in this book, excuse me, all illustrated, to try and put to bed some of the hoary myths that go with this, and to try and to drive this thing on. And I'm pretty proud of it, but only time will tell what people out there think of it. I think it does take the story a little bit further on than perhaps where it was to this date.
Well, I mean, knowing your previous books, Peter, I'm sure it will be a fantastic body of work, which we're all eagerly looking forward to. I mean, I think the thing that comes across is the scale of this, and also the complexity within that scale. I mean, they didn't know how many non-smokers were in the Connaught Rangers. War Office couldn't ring up King Street Trench at Bois Grenier and say, can you, it's almost like a Bairnsfather cartoon. Can you indent the number of tins of plum and apple jam you've got? Can you tell me how many non-smokers you've got in your infantry battalion?
Yeah.
Did they just send an approximate number with each
batch? That's a really interesting point. I think this is one of the problems they had. It must have been an approximate number. They must have sent for every unit number. I can't remember now. I've got it written down, but it's a sort of percentage. One for every 56. That's it. One non-smoker for every 56 smokers. So that potentially means that these things are all packaged up in boxes and crates, and they were sent. This is in 1914, and they were sent over, of course, with great complexity. They had to be handled by the postal authorities in the UK and by the field post officers, and so on. And it became a major, major undertaking. So imagine, can't you, the challenges they had of disseminating ones which are non-smokers and smokers. Now, we have got Billy Congreve's book, and he makes reference to the fact that he had a choice. And he decided to go with the non-smokers. And he was very pleased because it contained the cigarette card photograph within it. So he said he was lucky for that. And that's the only one that you really come across where there's a reference to it. Everybody else just receives their gift boxes. And the photographs that you see, and there aren't actually that many of them, of people receiving gift boxes. There's a classic set of photographs of Army Veterinary Corps soldiers somewhere in France, receiving both the King and Queen's Christmas card, and sort of, it's quite staged looking, but they're giving the cards out and they're putting them on a Christmas tree, and on that Christmas tree, you've got boots and mess-tins and what have you as little decorations. And then there's one with a Army Veteran Corps soldier sitting down in wellies and examining his gift. It doesn't have one of the Tinder lighters, of course, because they were distributed later if they could get them. So it's very, very complicated about how they got them. Each one of these gifts was in a cardboard box, and that cardboard box in itself has a lot of, designed by and developed by George Watts, who's a cardboard box maker. You look at the people who made the boxes. Britain was at the forefront of making tinware, fancy tins with coronation stuff on it, or patriotic stuff. So these also had made the Queen Victoria chocolate tin in 1900. There's a direct, I haven't got one in arm shot here, but there's a direct connection between Queen Victoria's box and this one. There's no doubt that the two have connections, and the same people. So you have, people and tin manufacturers in Southwark, tin manufacturers in Mansfield, closer
and
to York.
Barnsley as well. They made them here in Barnsley. Yeah, there was a factory that made them. Yeah,
exactly. So they were farmed out to these people, and so you got. It's very complicated how you derive this. And on top of all of this, the average soldier was not only receiving these in 1914, but they were receiving a whole host of other things. There may be, depending on where you are. And one of the mythologies is about Queen Alexandra's gift tin, which is a tin with Queen Alexandra's picture on the front, which has a set of cigarettes in it. A number of people have speculated this was probably given out to the household division, the guards and what have you. There's no evidence to that. This was given by Queen Alexandra to wounded soldiers. And if you look at wounded soldiers in certain hospitals, particularly in London, as you can imagine, rather than further afield in the UK, if you were a soldier in one of the prominent hospitals in the UK in London, you would receive Queen Alexandra's tin with its cigarettes in it. You would receive a tin of chocolates from Cadbury's. You may receive a tin of toffees from the Grocers Federation. You might receive, depending on what's happening, a gift book from King Albert of the Belgians. You receive Princess Mary's gift tin, and you'd receive the King and Queen's Christmas card, and some plum pudding, which was given out as well by the Daily News. So that's quite a haul. If you're in a choice hospital in London somewhere, or Manchester, so probably I would imagine Barnsley, with its own prideful approach, would also be claiming some of that. Men at the front, slightly different, of course. Men in hospital at the front, but all of them received that. 1915, what's happening? No Princess Mary tin. These were only for men in uniform in 1914. Yes, there was Cadbury's. Yes, Queen Alexandra continued in her role, but you didn't see any other major gifts. And what it comes down to is local comforts funds. So I'm sure Barnsley was uppermost in that. Certainly a number of other towns and cities, Nottingham in particular, Birmingham, of course. These are all gathering together funds to supply their men at the front. There's a village in Scotland, I think it was the Duchess of something or other, who got together, and it's just like 200 men, and they got this huge box full of things, and that went through the war. So it fractionates down into a much more personal approach. Never was Princess Mary's gift tin repeated until 2018. And in 2018, Fortnum and Masons produced their own gift tin, and that is a phenomenal story in its own right. I'm looking so if I can reach over to mine. Fortnum and Masons, a premier, like Asprey's, a premier organisation in London. People will know it for its tea and its baskets and its hampers and what have you. I was given the greatest help by Dr. Andrea Tanner, who's the archivist at Fortnum and Masons. I'm still in shock at the amount of support that they gave. They were very, very proud that they come up with the idea of doing their own design for this and sending it out as a matter of complete surprise to men and women in the armed forces who are on deployment in Christmas 2014, not 2018, 2014. And in 2014, these service people received this thing and they were absolutely astounded. So I've got David Curran, who is a sergeant in the Royal Air Force, and squadron leader Stuart Roxburgh, both of them who I come across through Twitter, both of whom shared with me their experience of receiving and the delight that they had. And in addition to that, there's Operation Christmas Box, which has been going since 2004. You possibly, or listeners may possibly not have heard of it. This gives a box full of goodies to everybody on active deployment across the world, and have been doing so since 2004. And it is universally supported. People love it. They're very proud to receive it. I was given a box, and it's packed full of goodies. So Operation Christmas Box, check it out on its website. But that charity, very much under the radar, is both that and Fortnum and Mason's making direct reference to Princess Mary's example. And I think this is a real example of the legacy of that. It's not forgotten. It's a really important thing. It had a major impact on the lives of the men and women at the time. They kept them throughout the war. They kept them beyond that. And I think the fact that there may well be, a couple of million of them kicking around still doesn't diminish their absolute cultural value, which is they're an amazing, as you said right from the beginning, well, a real icon of the First World War. And, I'm really proud to have taken part in trying to unpick this tangled web of the story of the real endeavor of both Princess Mary and everybody that worked hard. And the one unsung heroine I should mention is Lady Kathleen Lindsay, who ran the SRD in Deptford, Supply Reserve Depot, that's the one, because that's where everything was packed. That's where everything was organised. And Lady Lindsay was the phraseology site, the manageress of that. And she had underneath her something like 1,500 men and women who worked on this. She was the one who oversaw everything that was packed. She received, I think, an OBE or equivalent in the war. But has anybody heard of her? Probably not. But she is, again, one of the unsung heroines of this story, amazing story.
Well, I mean, what an amazing tale. I mean, it's an object that we're so familiar with, but obviously, clearly, we might be familiar with the object, but not the story behind it. So your book's going to fill in a huge amount of gaps in our knowledge with that, by the sound of it.
So.
I mean, it's an amazing tale, Peter, when you think of the sheer numbers and like you say, the importance of it. I mean, pretty much every veteran that I interviewed in the 80s had one of these things that they kept their medals in. It was often sitting on the mantelpiece, and it would have their cap badge and shoulder title in it, and and they would get it down and proudly open it up and so on. And quite a few of them I've seen where they've scratched their name and details on. And it's amazing. You mentioned the ones found with the bodies of those possibly Gurkha soldiers, and I've seen them turn up in museums and private collections out on the battlefields. One was found at Fromell to a Lincolnshire lad killed there on the 9th of May 1915, and I've seen one at Gallipoli actually at the little museum at Krithia. They've got one, and it's interesting that you said that those lads got it en route to Gallipoli, because I'd often thought, was it a regular, like my Uncle Dan, because he was there on Christmas Day in France 1914, was wounded a few weeks later and ended up at Gallipoli in the summer of 15. So he presumably, I mean, I don't know if he ever still had his tin after the war, but because he pawned his medals and never got them back. But I'd often wondered if it was from a regular, but no, it could be from one of the lads in the Manchester Regiment Territorials who were in Egypt. So it's just the whole complexity and the way it all ties all these guys together. It's just phenomenal.
It is, and I think like you, Paul, I always thought that it was just those men in 1914, but I have a team inscribed to a lad from the Bradford Pals, and he inscribed his name on it. And I think, again, it's equally likely that at Gallipoli there could have been one of the 10th or 11th divisions that landed at Suvla Bay. And the ones from Gallipoli have only just come to my attention. It's fascinating. And I think it is this. I never understood how it was that so many were in the hands of territorials or New Army, and now I can see that, and it's a phenomenal engagement. And in relation to that, using the box to contain the memories. Remember my Gunner Shellis, the first one I ever obtained. I'm very proud that in my chapter on the Indian soldiers, I'm using a photograph that was published in the Hindu newspaper in 2016. And it shows a young man, Mohammed Bavali, who is holding his great-grandfather's tin with his father's police medals. And it goes something like this, he protected the tin, his grandfather protected it from a tsunami, his father protected it from some other storm, he protected it from a fire, and the story was sufficient that it made a national newspaper in 2016. So yeah, I think it's something really deserving wider understanding, and it encapsulates the whole war. I think is the way we would look at it.
So your book that's coming out, when is that due out?
Not surprisingly, it's going to be out in time for Christmas or before the leaves fall, depending on which side you determine. Currently, what we're doing at the moment is that there's an offer through Indiegogo. The idea for that is to offer special editions to people who might wish to access them. And so we just put out the call for that. It's a pre-registration. You get information on that. And that's going to be special edition. Not only will it be signed, obviously, there will be a slipcase, which will have the image of which is a cardboard surround, which will have the image of the box upon it. It will have postcards that were prevalent at the time. So there were a number of postcards, some of which were designed by Rawlinson in the Fourth Corps, and they're interesting in their own right. Lady Rawlinson gave Christmas puddings, and as well as the Christmas card given by her husband. So a number of things like that. There will be other items which are branded in terms of Princess Mary's image. And also one can get a reproduction of the recruiting poster, one of the classic recruiting posters from Lord Kitchener, Your Country Needs You. Not a reproduction of a reproduction, but a reproduction of a real one that I possess. So it's straight from the horse's mouth. And so all of these things are available because I know one of the things about these is it's a cultural object. I don't mean my book, I mean the whole thing about the tin. And I think people may well be interested in that. So that's an Indiegogo site. That will be coming live. It's pre-registration phase at the moment. That'll be coming live in the next week or so. People can then decide if they wish to access one of those, but of course they can get it in due course. And I would imagine that's coming out towards the end of the autumn of this year. It's currently in production. I'm waiting for the proofs to arrive. You know how that feels. With bated breath. It's in full color, and I think looks pretty beautiful. But I would say that, wouldn't it?
That sounds fantastic. We'll put a link on the podcast website to that Indiegogo page so they can look that up and pre-order that. I mean, that sound. I mean, I think it's a nice resonance what you've done there between the issuing of this fantastic gift, or more than a century ago, and producing a special edition of the book about it. That I think in itself becomes part of that cultural heritage. So that's a great thing to do, Peter.
I hope so. I really do, because I think my family are now fed up to the back teeth of hearing about Princess Mary, and since I seem to have amassed rather more than I imagined I might do. And I think it was really, I'm really pleased actually. One last small snippet. I'm really pleased you mentioned about soldiers engraving or scraping their initials on it, because one of the things that's always puzzled me, I don't know about you, but you see the words Christmas 1914. I've always wondered, I like a bit of symmetry, why that wasn't in the center of that tin, in the center of that little plinth. And the reason was that Adshed had determined that Private Smith would put Private Smith Christmas 1914 Have you ever seen one like that? I've never seen a soldier ever inscribing it in there. Usually it's right across the front, right across the back, or in between. So good chance, good approach, Professor Adshed, but maybe you should have told the soldiers. They may have done that.
Fascinating. Well, that's brilliant, Peter. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you and hear your stories. It's a fascinating subject. Really, really looking forward to the book. Wish you well with that. And we'll keep those who subscribe to the podcast up to date with the progress of that as we move towards your publication date. But we'll put the links on the website so they can seek that out. So thanks again, Peter. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Paul. First opportunity to speak about it. I'm never going to stop speaking about it. Thank you very much.
No, don't ever stop. Brilliant. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to an episode of The Old Front Line with me, military historian Paul Reed. You can follow me on Twitter at Somcor. You can follow the podcast at Old Frontline Pod. Check out the website at oldfrontline.co.uk, where you'll find lots of podcast extras and photographs and links to books that are mentioned in the podcast. And if you feel like supporting us, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/oldfrontline, or support us on Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/oldfrontline. Links to all of these are on our website. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.